Hello ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, innies, outies and in-betweeners. My name's Dan and welcome back to another PAP Reports. Today is Tuesday the 10th of March 2020 and today we're starting with former Coventry Police Sergeant 46-year-old Stephen Shaw, who admitted at Birmingham Magistrates Court last August of attempting to cause or incite a female under 13 to engage in sexual activity and attempting to engage in sexual communication with a child. Shaw was arrested on the 22nd of August last year after sending the messages to a social media account he believed belonged to a 12-year-old girl, but was in fact being operated by undercover police. He attended Birmingham Crown Court on Monday where he was granted bail after being told he may face a custodial sentence. The earlier hearing was told Shaw sent messages to a fake profile being operated by an officer pretending to be aged almost 13, telling her she could pass for 15, before making numerous comments about sexual acts in online chats. A lawyer acting for Shaw said the officer had never met with a child he had chatted to online and had half expected the profile he had contacted to be an adult posing as a youngster. Of course he did. Shaw will be sentenced on April the 1st. Now we head over to Northumbria where a misconduct hearing against Inspector Stephen Appleton found allegations that he misused police computers to obtain confidential information in order to pass them to a friend of a wanted man as proven. Appleton was based at South Shields Police Station in Millbank and worked in CID. The hearing was told the former officer breached the rules by using the force's computer system to access information about Mr. X on 5 occasions and looked up details about his associates and premises connected to him without legitimate policing reasons. On June the 6th, 2016, when Mr. Y was wanted on suspicion of assault, he accessed information about him and premises linked to him when he was not an investigating officer, spoke to Mr. X by telephone on a number of occasions on that day and rang the wanted man himself, passing on confidential information to him directly or indirectly. Between September 2014 and June 2016, he continued to associate with Mr. X, making 495 calls or texts to his mobile, met with him on at least 6 occasions and failed to report that as part of the force's inappropriate association procedure. In November 2015, he used a computer system to access information about an individual who was connected to his family at the time, in a search which was without a legitimate policing purpose, breaching the force's rules. Despite the 4 allegations covering discreditable conduct, confidentiality, orders and instructions, and honesty and integrity being proven, lucky police privileged Appleton has been told his pension will not be affected, although he will be barred from working in any further policing role. Appleton left the force before the hearing was held, and Superintendent Steve Amari, head of Northumbria Police's Professional Standards Department, said, "When we became aware of the concerns relating to former Officer Stephen Appleton, we conducted a thorough investigation. Despite the fact he is no longer employed by the force, it was important and right that we pursued formal disciplinary proceedings. We presented a case relating to 4 allegations of misconduct to an independently chaired hearing, which delivered a finding of gross misconduct. The actions of this individual were completely unacceptable and are in no way reflective of the professionalism displayed by officers and staff every single day. So although he clearly broke regulations, and I suspect laws too, and you yourself say how the actions of this individual were completely unacceptable, he gets away with 0 punishment. And if anyone thinks being sacked or having to leave the police because of your actions is punishment, then you're a moron. No wonder the police still feel they can get away with practically anything." Former Cleveland Police Constable Paul Webster, who appeared in PAP Reports on the 21st of January and PAP Reports on the 18th of February, is back. In January, Webster appeared at Teesside Magistrates Court, charged with driving whilst under the influence of alcohol and dangerous driving, after he was found to be more than twice the legal drink-drive limit on Wednesday, December 18th. Webster initially pleaded not guilty, but in February at Teesside Crown Court, the 38-year-old changed his plea to guilty, where he was bailed unconditionally, although had an interim driving disqualification put in place and ordered to return on the 9th of March for sentencing. Webster's defence said he was devastated at the consequences, which had led him to resign from Cleveland police. It had caused a rift with his partner, and in his shame, she had sought medical help from an organisation to tackle his personal problems. What a surprise. She said that he was very fearful of the case. It was his first conviction and he pleaded guilty at the earliest opportunity. But he didn't know. He denied his guilt in magistrates' court and took well over a month longer to get an admission from him in the Crown Court. Judge Stephen Ashurst said, "I take the view in this case that your public downfall extends to a very considerable punishment. You have learned a very hard lesson as a result of the decision you took to drive." Webster of Parklands Avenue, Billingham, was given a 12-month community order with attendance on a group impaired driver's course, 20 days rehabilitation requirements, and disqualified for 18 months, and until he passes an extended driving course with £80 court costs. Well, bugger me. Now that's the kind of punishment that will strike fear into the hearts of every hardened criminal. A Cleveland police spokeswoman said Webster resigned in January, and as he is no longer a serving officer, they wouldn't comment further. On the 28th of January and the 3rd of February, I reported about how Gary Webb was misidentified, arrested and then taken to and held in Addywell prison after police told the Procurator Fiscal he was a suspect, despite him having different fingerprints, no tattoos like the suspects, and his passport proving his identity. Now politicians are saying that the Crown Office is shirking responsibility after blaming Police Scotland for an innocent man being locked up for 4 days. When asked about the case, the Crown Office blamed Police Scotland, but MSPs say questions remain and ask why the Crown insists there are no lessons to be learned, despite a fiscal at Hamilton Sheriff Court asking for the wrong man to be jailed. They also question why none of the officers involved were charged with criminal neglect of duty and attempting to pervert the course of justice. When Mr Webb first complained, Police Scotland simply dismissed his complaint, but after he contacted the Police Investigations and Review Commissioner, the police involved were arrested. Eventually, Mr Webb was awarded £100,000 in compensation for his ordeal, which is an admission of liability, but as yet none of those involved in his arrest and detention have been held accountable. Colin Smythe, Labour MSP for South Scotland, who is to meet Gary to discuss his treatment, said, "The experience Mr Webb faced was appalling and has had a traumatic impact on him. The original decisions to relentlessly pursue him in the face of overwhelming evidence police had the wrong man have been exacerbated by the lack of action since. The Crown don't appear to accept any responsibility despite the fact they made the formal request that Gary was remanded in custody. They say this was based on what police told them, yet won't release that information. Surely they need to review how they make such decisions. If the Crown Office are clear that police were to blame for this debacle, then it is worth asking why the Crown Office subsequently decided not to prosecute any of the officers involved." The Scottish Government said it is intended to publish the final report of the independent review this autumn. The consideration of specific complaints and investigations will not form part of the review beyond informing an overall assessment of the efficiency of current systems. The review is seeking evidence from a number of members of the public regarding their experience of complaints handling, investigations and misconduct. Unbelievable. These people, they really think they can do what they want with impunity. Last week, a disabled mother and her son criticised police for failing to address 4 years of relentless hate crime directed at them. Over the past 4 years, Ruth and Zach Jones from Bristol have lodged around 50 complaints with police, claiming the abuse and threats they have suffered have been similar to those experienced by Bijan Ebrahimi in the lead up to his murder in 2013, including a catalogue of abuse aimed at them, damage to their property, including a brick thrown through the window of their council house and 4 vehicles set alight on their driveway. Posters labelling them wrongly as paedophiles were also put up around their local area. Disabled Iranian refugee Mr Ebrahimi was beaten to death and set alight by his neighbour Lee James on another Bristol estate in 2013. He too was wrongly branded a paedophile. A report by the Safer Bristol Partnership found that Avon and Somerset Police and Bristol City Council had been institutionally racist and to have repeatedly sided with abusers during their investigation. 57-year-old Miss Jones only has the use of one hand following a brain hemorrhage, and her 29-year-old son has Asperger's and a rare skin condition called epidermal nevus. He has been through more than a dozen operations, but still has visible dark blotches on his skin. Zach Jones says, "It happens every day. Every time I go out, it always happens. I get bullying in some way, shape or form. It's just awful. We just want to be able to live our lives properly. The police have failed us, they're no help." His mum, Ruth, added, "I've already had 3 cars and a caravan torched. I don't want to be the next bonfire. I just think that police should do their job. If the police had done their job 3 years ago, I wouldn't be in this situation. I've ended up and Zach's ended up living as victims." It was discovered that in 2016, the then beat manager, PC Jeanette Cadden, wrote in the police log of reported incidents, "I believe that Ruth is carrying out the damage herself." She judged that Miss Jones was the aggressor and not the victim. Chief Inspector Runacres said he wholeheartedly disagreed with Mrs. Cadden's comments recorded in the log. He added, "What I can say is that having looked through the call logs of all of the incidents reported since that date, those sentiments are not reflected in the response from officers. We have been absolutely mindful of the vulnerability that Ruth is subjected to, and I've been very clear in my expectations to my officers." The last recorded complaint made to the police by Mrs. Jones was in May 2019. He said the Jones family had been on a problem-solving plan to help manage the issues in partnership with the council, but that had ended in August. Well, maybe consider less about problem-solving by speaking to the victim and more proactive problem-solving by identifying the offenders would be more appropriate. Just saying. In PAP Reports on the 6th of March, I told you about a serving Met Police constable who had been arrested by counter-terrorism police on suspicion of membership of a proscribed organisation linked to right-wing terrorism. Yesterday, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services warned about the threats from extremists inside their own forces. The HMI-CFRS found that while officers worked through the government's Prevent Counter-Extremism programme was broadly good, few considered the possibility that their own colleagues could be radicalised. Their report said the vulnerability of staff generally wasn't referred to in forces Prevent training, but it is a real threat. Only one force had arrangements in place acknowledging that members of staff vulnerable to radicalisation might need safeguarding. HMI-CFRS said that few of the 43 regional police forces in England and Wales it inspected recognised the possibility that a police officer or member of staff may be vulnerable because of the influence of a partner or close family member. Staff employed by the police are in a position of trust and the public expects high standards. The approach adopted by forces doesn't complement Prevent. The report called for the National Police Chiefs Council to create national guidance on applying Prevent to police staff, including during selection processes and for welfare and vetting. But the problem is with these guidelines is that they are just that, guidelines. They can and often are ignored rather than offering guidelines, maybe you should think about creating policies that can actually be enforced. The watchdog found that different police forces dealt inconsistently with Prevent referrals, which are made by people concerned that someone may be radicalised. We also found some evidence that the subjective assessment identifying a terrorism element in a case wasn't being correctly applied. The report added, saying some cases were being wrongly passed to the channel process that provides ideological intervention. After questioning police on how they judged the success of their work, HMI-CFRS found there was no coherent performance management framework for Prevent activity and said the MPCC must develop performance measures. HMI-CFRS said the Home Office should review why the Ministry of Defence Police and other armed force units were not included under the Prevent duty, which requires other public bodies to report radicalisation. It's pretty scary that the MOD and armed units are not deemed worthy of checking out for radicalisation. Greater Manchester Police arrested a 17-year-old boy for terrorising people with a machete, only to release him so he could go on to commit robberies. A 17-year-old boy who can't be named because of his age, was finally locked up after receiving a 24-month detention and training order during a hearing at Manchester Crown Court after he was initially arrested after they robbed a Subway sandwich shop and a discount shop in Salford in March last year with a machete and knives, where one worker from a discount store received a cut to the face from the blade. The teenager first came to the attention of the police following an incident outside the Red Lion pub in Salford. After having an argument with his mother, he damaged a car windscreen after throwing a brick at it. He also threw a brick at the smoking area of the pub, which hit a customer to the leg. Then at the front of the pub, he hit a window with an implement, causing it to smash and glass to go over customers, including the man who the brick had hit earlier. Shortly after, the teenager and another male, who were both covering their faces, were in a taxi outside the pub. They began shouting abuse and threatened a man and his wife who were leaving the pub because of the trouble. The couple started to run away. The teenager followed and hit the man to the back with a machete. Although he did not suffer any serious injuries, only a red mark and bruising, the couple got away and went back to the pub for safety. The following day, the teenager approached two police officers and handed himself in. He told police, "I did it. I smashed the windows. I hit someone with a machete too. It was me. My head is fucked up. I need help." Police interviewed him, but he was released under investigation. The teenager then went on, armed with a machete and another unidentified male who had one knife in each hand, to enter the discount store on Bolton Road and threaten a worker on the till. Both were said to have been swinging the knives about and demanded money, and they were handed over about £250 to £300 from the till. The following day, the teenager, again armed with a machete, and another male armed with knives, went into the Subway shop, also on Bolton Road. He was arrested a few days later in Salford, where he was found with a kitchen knife and a snap bag of cannabis. He was again released under investigation by police. Judge Hilary Manley said the delays in charging the boy and in bringing the case to court were deeply troubling. It really beggars belief and is, in the view of this court, nothing short of scandalous. She also said after being released, the boy was simply put back out onto the streets of this city with no restrictions. He had used a lethal machete to terrorise and rob victims, she said. The defendant pleaded guilty to 2 counts of criminal damage, 1 count of attempted Section 18 wounding with intent, 2 counts of robbery, 4 counts of possession of a blade, 1 count of affray, 1 count of possessing cannabis, and also a Bail Act offence. I think this is another example of how this under investigation BS doesn't actually do anything to help. Under investigation is nothing like being on bail, where you have to go and report regularly to the station, which in my opinion is a good idea, especially in serious cases. But instead, people are left for as long as the police want, without intervention or actions being taken to prevent them from reoffending. This was a knife incident, and with every Tom, Dick and Sally in government and policing screaming about how we need to get knife crime offenders off the streets, this really goes against everything that they say. Cressida Dick, Britain's so-called most senior police officer, is feeling relieved after being cleared over complaints about her role in the disastrous investigation into false claims of a VIP paedophile ring. Dick was responsible for supervising the senior investigation officer, who said allegations made by fantasist Carl Beach, which were found to be false, were credible and true. The IOPC said it was not necessary to look into claims Metropolitan Police Commissioner Dame Cressida Dick misled the public with comments she made about Operation Midland, adding that criminal or disciplinary hearings were not justified. Of course not. An LGBT woman in a high-ranking position, it would certainly go against all the politically correct snowflakes' idea of the government, wouldn't it? We do not consider the allegation that the Commissioner deliberately misled the public regarding her role in Operation Midland requires investigation. There was no indication she may have committed a criminal offence or behaved in a manner which would justify disciplinary proceedings, it said. Former Conservative MP Harvey Proctor hit out at the IOPC's decision, saying that this provides even more substantial evidence that the IOPC is not fit for purpose, and the currently flawed system should be replaced to be truly independent. Hear, hear. Scotland Yard has since referred itself again to the IOPC over complaints that officers had failed to fully investigate 2 other men for lying about being abused as children. The IOPC added, it is important to acknowledge that the Metropolitan Police Service has made significant changes as a result of the review of Operation Midland by Sir Richard Henricks, and of recommendations made as a result of our own investigation into how the force dealt with search warrants under Operation Kentia. This clearly was and still is a very difficult situation that has impacted Mr. Proctor's life significantly. Our assessment of the allegations and information should not detract from that fact. Thanks to Enoch's Ghost for the following. The Centre for Women's Justice has submitted a super complaint to Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabularies, claiming failures among police forces over cases of 19 women, including police officers from 15 force areas, who have been victims of abuse, violence, stalking and rape from police officers. The CWJ said that while without doubt there are cases that are dealt with properly, a central concern was police abusers are being protected and not brought to justice because of their positions. No shit. The super complaint, which is supported by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, said victims feel doubly powerless. They experience the powerlessness that most domestic abuse victims experience, but in addition, their abuser is part of the system intended to protect them, the report said. It calls for changes, including victims being able to report their claims to the Independent Office of Police Conduct rather than a police force. Neighbouring police forces investigating such claims should be the norm. Officers guilty of abuse also being subject to misconduct procedures. Restrict officers facing allegations from working with victims of domestic or sexual abuse. One of the women who gave her story to the CWJ told the BBC her ex-husband physically and sexually abused her, as well as using coercive and financial control. She said she had reported him to his force, Northumbria Police, but no action was taken against him, either criminally or by professional standards. He used to say to me, I'm a police officer, no one's going to believe you. Sounds about right. The woman, who is from Tyneside, said police lost evidence she provided and her husband was given her witness statement, which later went missing from the system. She also said her husband accessed her medical records and got access to a lot of things civilians wouldn't be able to get. There's nowhere to go when it's a police officer. They can find you anywhere. They can trace your car, she said. If you try and prosecute someone who is a police officer, they know the court system and what questions they are going to be asked. The super complaint cites a number of examples of no criminal charges being brought despite victims making reports and claiming to supply evidence. It also refers to cases where no misconduct proceedings took place, with one woman who claimed she was raped being told superiors would have a quiet word with the suspect. Wow. A Freedom of Information request showed that there were 19 convictions for 493 reports against police officers, a rate of just 3.9%, while the general population rate is 6.2%. The complaint will be investigated by HM Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, the IOPC and College of Policing, who will then decide what action, if any, needs to be taken. And there's that police privilege showing its ugly face yet again. And thank you to Dee for the last of today's reports. I have spoken in the past about how much money is being spent on police compensation, from things such as stubbing a toe to more serious injuries sustained while in the execution of their duties. Well, now we find out that there's a potential £488 million bill for the Police Service of Northern Ireland police constables who have been hurt on duty. The audit officers called the scheme for payments not fit for purpose and said substantial changes were needed to make things affordable. Payments to police and prison officers have soared since 2015, a report by the Public Spending Watchdog found. Much of it is down to claims being made years after the injury occurred, and if successful, being backdated. One recent award went back 25 years and cost £429,000 in arrears alone. In Northern Ireland, there are 12 claims a week on average compared to 20 a year made to the Metropolitan Police Service in London, even though the Met has 30,000 police officers compared to just 7,000 in the PSNI. Last year, the scheme cost the PSNI 40 million and the Northern Ireland Prison Service 2 million. The Audit Office calculates the PSNI's future payments or liabilities as being 488 million. Claims involve monthly amounts payable for life on top of one-off awards. Around 2,800 serving or retired officers receive payments, it says. Post-traumatic stress disorder has recently emerged as one of the most common injuries. I suppose that's because it doesn't have any real symptoms visibly. The head of the Audit Office, Kieran Donnelly, said he was told the scheme was intended to provide against loss of earnings. That being the case, it's difficult to understand why an award is payable for life when generally earnings capacity reduces in retirement. The Prison Service Injury Scheme operates separately. It makes payments to 181 people and its liabilities are calculated at 53 million. Mark Lindsay, the chairman of the Northern Ireland Police Federation, which represents most officers, said this report fails to take into account Northern Ireland's unique environment over the past 30 or 40 years. Officers have been subjected to some of the worst incidents anywhere in the world, and this compensation scheme reflects that. I reckon maybe with a comment like that, he's looking for a claim himself at some point in the future. Can't have the system overhauled before you get to retirement and want a cushy one on extra benefits, can you? Big thank you to the first Patreon supporters, Motty Lad, Holly, Adi and Dave, whose support is helping me to continue providing you this daily content, especially as almost every report contains content that's deemed unsuitable for most advertisers. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. Please like, share, comment and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts, as I know many of you will. And until next time, stay safe, look after each other, film the police and other officials. Good night, all. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like the content and you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so. In the description of every video there are some links to ways that you're able to help support the channel so I can continue putting out content. If you're unable to help us in that way, hit that subscribe button up the top there. If you haven't already, become a subscriber. That is support enough. Share the videos, comment, like, it all helps. If you're looking for something else to watch, up top there is my latest video. Down the bottom there is a video that YouTube recommends for you.